In this video, we will have a look at a recent over-the-board FIDE-rated game that I played in a tournament. This is a game I played with white pieces. At this point, I had 1.5 out of 5 points, which is not great. So I really wanted to win these 2 final rounds so I could end with the good score of 3.5 out of 7 in this incredibly difficult tournament. So playing with the white pieces here against a 1970, but that is FIDE rating. So chess.com rating would probably be 2,200, 2,250 at least, something I think in that range. So d4, knight to f6, and I play knight to d2. So this is the Pegasus system opening. It is what I always play. The only downside, of course, with being a YouTuber is that everyone can just publicly figure out what opening I play and they can prepare themselves. And my opponent here played an incredibly well opening, they played that incredibly well. And I asked him after the game, did you prepare? And he said, yeah, I have prepared a little for this game. So I will show you one of the most important lines from the Pegasus system as my opponent played right into it. So the goal with this opening is just to play the pawn to e4 if we can, but usually black will make that impossible. That's one of the best things that black can do. They just make sure that we don't get that pawn to e4. That's okay. That just means we are going to shift strategies and we are going to play c4. Why do we play c4? We are hoping that they take this so that we can develop with a tempo. This has also removed their central pawn, and that makes the likelihood that e4 will happen bigger. So if this pawn is gone, there is a chance for us to play e4. My opponent did not take the pawn, he protected the pawn. The usual moves are e6 and c6. Those are the moves I see to protect the pawn. He played c6. Here I play knight to f3. It's mostly a waiting move to see what my opponent is going to do next, and it also just develops the knight. And my opponent played the move pawn to e6. But now black has created a weakness. This pawn on b7 is unprotected, and the bishop, who could protect it, has moved, and it has been blocked in by its own pawn. So that means we can now take the time to play this move queen b3 and attack that weak pawn on b7. There are multiple ways for black to defend this pawn. Black could play queen c8. Black could play queen c7, which is the move that was played in the game. Black could play queen b6, and those are, I think, the 3 most common moves to save this pawn. b6 technically also saves the pawn, but it's never really a move you want to make as you are weakening your pawn chain, and this c6 pawn can become weak, and sometimes there are even tactics available if black plays b6. So opponent played a queen c7. I just quickly wanted to show you, if they play queen b6, don't take the queen. Your goal is to get them to take your queen. So you play the move c5, and if they take your queen, you can capture back with the pawn. Looks very strange, but you capture back with the pawn, and white always has great positions from this. You can eventually play b5, trade, create a bit of a weakness there on c6. Then you can attack that weakness with multiple pieces, even with a rook lift sometimes, or you could just play a second b5. So basically, the whole middle game plan here is just pushing these pawns. But my opponent played the move queen c7 instead, which develops the queen and also protects the pawn. So this queen move, it's not just a one-move threat. We also play it to protect the d3 square, since now we can develop our bishop to d3. That was not possible earlier because the queen was blocked in by our knight. So this is how we fix that problem, by gaining a tempo and then developing the bishop. Black can take, black can move back, black can also ignore. Most of the time they take, and we can recapture with the queen. And this was the end goal. Now we have this very nice centralized queen that is protecting those 3 central squares, and pushing those central pawns is really our plan. Opponent develops knight to d7, we castle, and opponent plays bishop to e7, and then we play the move pawn to e4. And pawn to e4 is the general middle game plan for Pegasus. I always say if you can play pawn to e4 without losing material, you should play it. Losing material just meaning that we don't lose anything. Yes, the pawn can get exchanged, as happened during the game, but we don't lose anything, as we can recapture, the knight captures, the queen captures, the knight goes to f6, and then the queen goes to e2. So all of this was played, I think, in a matter of 2 minutes or so. The opponent was very well prepared for this sequence. Opponent also castles here. And this might look to you like, well, what happened? Like, what is the advantage from this position? Well, this is a very interesting position. Of course, the position is still equal. We are only at move 13, meaning black still has a decent position. But it's already slightly better for white, and white has many different middle game plans from this position. Why is this position better for white? Our pawns are more advanced, which means that we are attacking more squares into their position. We also have better possibility for our piece placement, and there are a couple of different middle game strategies you can go for. Generally, this starts with b3. Rook to the d file and bishop to b2. That is how I always start. And I know this position incredibly well. If you want to play Pegasus system, it's really worth studying this position in depth because you get this position all of the time. And I have many different middle game plans that I can play from here. And sometimes that's even, this is right, like move 15, but some of my preparation goes to move 30. Or move 35, because that's how deep you can prepare and how well you can know this exact structure, since you get it all of the time. Sometimes maybe with the queen on c8 instead, or with the bishop on d6 instead, or with the other rook there instead, but it's all pretty much the same thing. It's a very static position, meaning it's always very similar in nature. My opponent, however, played the move queen a5, and this is one of the moves where I don't have any super deep 20, 25 move, 30 move deep middle game plan against queen a5. Now after the game, I have studied this in depth and I have come up with a genius plan. I think it's almost a 30 move deep plan that I can play against this queen a5, which I'm not going to share in the video since of course my future opponents are watching this as well, and otherwise that plan has already been exposed. So queen a5 is an interesting move. I just continued bringing a rook to the d file. That is the general plan. And then my opponent plays this move bishop to a3. And bishop to a3 is an interesting choice by them. They are basically just playing for the endgame. They are just saying, look, your bishop is better than my bishop, so I am going to take my time here to develop and also to exchange this bishop for your bishop, which is okay. We exchange this piece, and then from here the game continues. What are the remaining middle game plans for white? Well, there are a couple of them. Pushing d5, if that is possible. Sometimes we can push d5, which could open up the position. Doubling the rooks on the d file is also a huge plan. And then there is also a more interesting plan, which is the one I played here, which is to go for an attack against the king. Even though it looks like we cannot attack from this position, there is the possibility for an attack. And that is what I will play. So I usually play moves like rook to d3 here. And a rook to d3 looks very logical. It looks like we are just doubling the rooks. But it's not just doubling the rooks. It's also the fact that this rook could slide over and it could attack any one of these pawns as well from one of these squares. So that's part of our kingside attack. The game can go in many different directions here. Usually black tries to double up rooks, which means black plays something like rook d7, rook d1, rook d8. Then you can always attack that with the knight. This goes here, and then black is getting into some bad piece coordination here. And from this position, you could even play the move c5 to hit the rook one more time, and then you can maneuver your knight eventually also to that d6 square, or you could start an attack against the king. So that's just one example of a basic plan. Instead, my opponent played a5, which I found interesting. Like a5, I was thinking, is your plan to play a4 and then exchange on this pawn? Maybe that could be a plan. Was a bit confused what the plan was behind that move, but all is good. We just continue doubling rooks to the d file. So I really thought my opponent was going to play this move a4 here. It looks like that was their plan. a4, which they can play. I would say, okay, you can play that. I improve my knight. And then if they take this, we would take that with the pawn. We keep our pawns together. This file has opened up, but we are also controlling some of those entry squares. So this is okay for white as well. I thought that was going to be the continuation of the game, but my opponent surprised me a bit by playing the move pawn to h6. And I would say this is really where the middle game plan begins and where the opening preparation ends, if you can call it that. Because this is for me a new position here. Pawn a5, pawn h6, queen is on a3. this is different. So as I said before, white has many different plans. The most interesting one being an attack against the king. And that is what I decided to play for in this game. So how can we attack the king? We start by playing knight to e5. And knight to e5 does two things. One, it attacks f7. Two, sometimes it attacks the rook on d7, which is winning a tempo if the rook is there. And then the third plan is that maybe you could in the future go to c4, attack the queen, and then go to that d6 square. So this is always a well-placed knight for the attack. My opponent saw that there was an attack coming, I think, so they decided to retreat with the queen. One very nice move that I actually never ended up playing in this position is just that c5 plan. So really remember this. This is one of the simplest plans you can play for from this position. The c5 move, black could take this square for the knight, but it does not really help them because we always have this attack. And the knight should actually go back. The knight belongs on f6. It needs to stop the attack. And then we can just simply go and maneuver our knight here. The knight could also go here. So this is a good position. White has winning advantage is over-exaggerated, but white has a good advantage in this position. However, I decided to go for a different plan, which it's not bad, but it's not the sharpest thing that I could have done. So a lesson here in these positions, that c5 push is great. I play queen f3. Queen f3 looks a bit strange, but the plan behind queen f3 is that we want to eventually put pressure on this f7 pawn and see if we could get an attack going. So opponent plays rook d6, and probably every single time you see this yellow question mark, which means slight inaccuracy, not the best move, it is because the best move is c5. So c5 is a great move there. So again, c5, now it comes with a tempo as well. Instead I play g4, which is a standard plan that you can play for here. The only reason it gets the question mark again is because of c5. Why do we play g4? It looks like a beginner mistake, but it's a genius move, since eventually we want to attack the knight, kick the knight, and then get an attack going against f7. So opponent doubles the rook, and then we play h4. Why do we play h4? Again, because we want to play g5 and get this attack going against the knight. That's the plan. All right, opponent saw this coming, so they moved the knight. If they don't move the knight, imagine if they play another move like pawn to b6. Look at the bar already. I just made a move. Well, actually, there is also the problem that knight takes c6 here. But just in general, if they make any other move, there is always this g5 take. And then after we take here, the knight will have to move. And then sometimes you could even infiltrate on the h-file and go for a checkmate there. So instead, my opponent retreated their knight, which slows down my attack a little bit. Because, well, first of all, I cannot play g5 anymore. Because if I go for this, well, everything just collapses. The queen takes, the knight drops. So great move here to slow down the attack. So I looked into this for quite a while. What to do as white? Probably h5 is a very good move. Instead, I decided to exchange the knight and then see if I could find any way to continue the attack using my queen and my rook. So far, the game actually still went pretty quick. We were in this position very quickly. So black has this triple stack, the 3 pieces on the pawn. But it's actually not something we need to worry about. So I made a small mistake here. What white should do is white should really just continue going for the kill. We play g5. And if they take this pawn, which looks like it's free, since there are 3 attackers and only 2 defenders, the pawn is not free. Because the first piece that needs to take is the rook. And then the second piece is the queen. So of course, if they go for this exchange, well, they just lose material. So we could technically have played here g5, take. Still, this pawn is poison, and whatever, I'll just make a bad move, but I'll just make a move for them. There is this plan of queen, and then, again, doesn't matter much what they play, rook, and then this infiltration. So this is really a great plan, and this shows how you can really get a good attack going by literally pushing the 2 pawns in front of your king. This is something that I only know because I have studied this position in that much depth. So this was really a bit of a missed opportunity. I feel like I should have played this g5, take, and white has this checkmate plan. And it's not that black is losing completely, they have some counterplay, but it's difficult for black. So this would have been a good move. And instead I played queen e4, thinking that my pawn needed an extra defender, which of course is not really true. It's well protected. And also moving the queen out of the way can help with part of the attack. Opponent plays queen to e7, attacking the pawn. And here I played pawn to h5, pushing the pawn out of danger, which was maybe not even necessary, but okay. And then opponent plays queen to g5, centralizing the queen, activating the queen a little bit more, but it's not really doing much. Like, look at this queen. It has some squares, and even this infiltration, it doesn't really matter. We just play f3. All the pawns are working together. It looks very strange, but the king is very safe. The queen by itself will never do anything. And then my opponent played the move Rook f8, which I found a bit of a strange move, because it's like they are undeveloping their rook, putting it back on the original square after castling, which allows me to play the move queen to e5, which hits the queen and the rook. And this is not so great for black, because if black takes this queen, they will actually get a losing endgame. So I thought this could happen. If black takes the queen, they get a losing endgame. Pawn takes queen. Let's say rook takes rook and rook takes rook. Why is this a losing endgame for black? Because, well, we control the open file, we have the opportunity to infiltrate, and then we can start picking up pawns, then we can start pushing these pawns, and also we have the more advanced pawns. Our pawns are pushed further up the board, which is always better in these endgames. So here I basically decided to play that move queen e5 and just try to beat my opponent in the endgame, since my plan of the kingside attack did not work, as I did not 100% play it correctly. Opponent just moved back with the rook, but this shows that they literally just wasted a full tempo, and it gives us the opportunity to take and double the pawns. All right, so this is mostly now going to become an endgame lesson, rook endgames, which is literally the most difficult topic in chess, especially with all of these pawns on the board, all of the rooks on the board. Even strong players usually can end up misplaying this position. But I felt like this was an interesting rook endgame for white, and I will explain a little bit the general strategy and how you should think in the rook endgame. So, what are the important factors in this position? The first one is always activity of the rooks, but both of our rooks are doing the exact same thing. They are on the same file. The only difference is my opponent's rooks are attacking a pawn, my rooks are defending a pawn. So that's a minor difference, but we are on the same file doing the same thing. The second thing is the activity of the king. Usually the closer your king gets to these four squares, the better your endgame will be. But we are both at the exact same square right now. Although I think I am the only one who could potentially reach one of those squares, my opponent will never be able to reach these squares with his king. And then the third thing is, of course, pawns. And I felt like, especially when it comes down to the pawns, I was going to have a better endgame. So, first of all, they have doubled pawns, which is clearly always a weakness in the endgame. It's less easy to activate these pawns and create a passed pawn. And then here we also just have a better structure. We have more central pawns. And potentially, if we ever play that move c5 again, which I would not play here, but if we play it at some point, we could give them a backwards pawn, a pawn that cannot move forward, which also weakens this one, and then that can become a target. So this was, I think, an interesting endgame to play as white. So what to do? I start by bringing my king closer. As I just said, king to the center is one of the main strategies. Opponent plays pawn to f6, and I bring my king to e3. Opponent brings his king here. So we already achieved part of the endgame strategy. Bring the king closer. We could go to e4 as well. I looked into this. We could go to e4. I was wondering maybe if they play f5. I don't really want to take this, I think, because now my pawns are also becoming messed up. You could say, well, you win a pawn. No, we are checkmated. We are checkmated if we do this exchange. So could this be played? Yes, but I didn't play it. Instead, I played rook to h1 because, of course, one of the biggest advantages that white has in this position is that pawn on the h file. That pawn can really become a problem for the opponent to deal with. Black uses this opportunity to play f5, which is smart because it steals this e4 square from my king. So since I didn't do it earlier, I will now not have the opportunity again, or at least not anytime soon, to play this move king a4. Then I played rook to d2. It's just a flexible move because maybe my rook wants to go here at some point. It's a flexible move. Opponent plays king f6, which makes sense. They are trying to get closer to the central squares as well. And here I actually made, apparently, a mistake. One of the best moves to play here is to play this h6 push. Black takes, and you take with the rook. And then you swing over this rook. And this was one possible endgame, and it's easy for black to go wrong here. If they allow the rooks to infiltrate, they could lose. There is still a line that holds on for black, but this was actually my original plan. This was my original plan. That's why I played the rook to d2. Instead, here I played c5, which I thought that this was the right moment to play the move, but apparently it wasn't. So when you play a move like c5, you are always weakening this pawn, because before the push we always had the possibility of d5. After the push we no longer have that possibility, so this pawn could be a problem. Also, this pawn is holding on because of my king and my rook, but black has the move pawn to f4, and if I go up with my king, which is the only move that keeps this pawn on the board, because of course if I step here they just take it and win my rook. And if I step back, they just take it. If I go up with my king, the problem is that this king is slowly running out of squares. And in the future, black could play e5. And there could even be a checkmate there. I'll just show you a random line, e5. And if we take this, that is a checkmate. So c5 was actually a mistake here. I should have continued with my plan and play h6. Opponent did not answer correctly. They played the move rook to d5, which is what I had expected. All right, and then I play h6. It's time to use this pawn. Now black plays this move, but it's one move too late, and I go back with my king. So this is a very interesting position. From this point forward, there are a lot of things going on in this endgame. First of all, black can win a pawn in the center, but the problem is that our pawn is too advanced. Because if we take, and then we push, this is promoting. So it looks like black can win a pawn, but that's not true. On the other hand, if they take this pawn, we get that check with the rook infiltration, and that is also great. Depends a little bit where the king goes. Let's say the king goes here. We would also be able to pick up this pawn as well. So interesting endgame. It's still equal, but it's an interesting endgame. So my opponent played the move g6. At the moment in the game, I really felt like g6 was a mistake. Computer, of course, always surprises us and says it's perfectly playable. But the moment that black plays the move g6, this pawn has now become a passed pawn, meaning it's a pawn that can promote. Two more squares and the pawn can become a queen, while previously the pawn could always be exchanged. So now this pawn is really an asset. It's really something that I can use to try to win the game. All right, here we had lots of shuffling. I'm not going to go super in-depth since that would make the video 45 minutes or so, but basically lots of shuffling, small improvements. And then here I played the move a3, which apparently it's losing, although it looked to me like this endgame was completely winning for white. And if you give the computer enough time, it eventually corrects itself and mostly says it's still all okay. I was giving up the central pawn, but giving up that central pawn was actually my plan, because rook takes, king goes back. But remember, we have this pawn that's going to promote. So black has to, in some way, go and protect that square. So this was one of my plans here. I was just thinking, look, I'll give up this pawn, but in exchange for that pawn, I get this pawn that's very close to promotion. Their final pieces need to always stay close to the square, and I just have my king to roam around the board and go attack all of the pawns. Rook h2, rook h8, pawn h7. pushing this pawn, which now really forces the opponent to defend this pawn. And the simple thing that I had looked into is that if black tries to go and grab the pawn, white always gets a winning endgame because of this. And then if black takes the pawn, rook takes, and the king is first. Remember how I said in the beginning, getting to these 4 central squares is key. We get here first, which means we can pick up the pawns, and after we pick up the pawns, we will also be able to go here, pick up more pawns, and then promote. So there is a problem here. Black can actually never go and grab that pawn. I looked at this position for quite a while, and I thought that my opponent's best option was probably to play the move e4, which looks strange. e4 gives up a pawn, but now they also have a passed pawn. They also have a pawn that can promote. So now they probably have a way to keep a draw in this endgame. I looked at this as their best option for quite a while. So again, some piece shuffling, some small improvements. Sometimes the computer says mistake, but then eventually it corrects itself. And then here we get to a position where black is going to be in Zugzwang. Meaning black will have no moves that are good for them. Every move will lose them the game. And this is really that moment. Because I am just going to infiltrate with my king. And there is nothing that my opponent can do. I will be infiltrating with my king to this square. If they choose to come closer with their king, I can still infiltrate. And if they choose to go here, I have the move rook to h6, if I remember my calculations correctly, which would attack the pawn, or even rook to d2, possibly giving up this pawn, but then infiltrating with this check. And then we are also here giving a check. Oops, that was a mouse slip. Let me go back. Yeah, they go here. We trade the rook, and then we also infiltrate with the king. So basically, in this position, after I play king d3, this is losing for black. This is losing for black because we will just infiltrate with the king and take the pawn. Holding on with the king doesn't help them because that lets us slide over the rook, give a check, and then either pick up pawns or trade the rook or pick up this pawn. So black loses, but the computer, of course, always finds an amazing way to draw this. Black should play e4, sacrificing the pawn because they are losing it anyways, but at least this way, they can start checking my king, and the check basically blocks out my king. My king cannot move up the board further. So I have to go sideways, and then they need to play the only move, which is king to h8, and now they could hold on for the draw. So that's incredible. The move e4 apparently still draws the game for black. Instead, my opponent gave a check, but this is game over. King e8, king to the corner, but we start picking up the pawns. And then for the rest of this endgame, it's quite easy. We pick up some pawns. We pick up more pawns. Then we have multiple passed pawns. We start pushing those. We use the king a little bit as well. And then I think here my opponent had a mental slip-up because after this move, there is just an unstoppable checkmate in 3. King f7, and my opponent resigned because whatever they do, let's say they move the pawn, there is a checkmate here with the pawn. So very nice game. I think especially this endgame was very instructive. So now I have 2.5 out of 6. One more round to go, which I will post shortly.